First of all, thank you for participating, and for those of you out there watching and listening, this is the first episode of Stay in Your Lane. I'm hosting it. My name is John Maley. We have two participants today that will be acting as a panel. Would you guys like to introduce yourself, Wendy?
Yeah, hi, I'm Wendy Workman. I am the Senior Director of Supply Chain at SK Food Group. We are based out of Arizona, but we have facilities in Arizona, Nevada, and Ohio.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Todd Burk. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Icon Foods based out of Portland, Oregon, and delighted to be here today.
Well, thank you both. I've known both of you off and on, done business with you here and there over the years for a long period of time. That's why I asked you to participate. I think we're in a really volatile time from everyone's perspective in our industry. I think we're seeing situations from a capacity and a cost perspective that we've never dreamed or seen in the past leading up to this point. Do you guys have anything you want to share or talk to on that?
Wendy, I'll let you take this one.
I guess for me, I'm actually not too surprised that this is where we're at. It's kind of been bubbling for a few years, and I was just waiting for, I guess, the other shoe to drop. And I think that's what we're seeing now. The industry and the market can only take so much volatility. It's just not sustainable. And, I'm a big believer of you reap what you sow. And I think some of what we're seeing are some of the effects of some broader decisions and some broader behaviors that the industry has had to experience. So for me personally, I don't know about Todd, I'm not too surprised that this is where we're at. And actually, I'm a little surprised it didn't happen sooner.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you, Wendy. I mean, I think I have some personal observations depending on which area within logistics that you're talking about. But there's been some challenges with labor and a number of other areas within the industry for quite some time. And I think they've gone unaddressed. And I think they've only been exacerbated by some of the things that have happened, most notably in the last 2 years. So, John, I'm sure you've got some unique perspective about that being sort of on the broker side, but I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on it.
For me to share what I feel is a value, we kind of aren't surprised. I'm personally not surprised, but I would say we're surprised at how long that this has been going on, that we're dealing with the volatility. And I would say that part of that is the lack of acknowledgement for so many people across the industry to how we've gotten here. So some things I prepared for us to talk about today are the changes that we've seen. I started in this business in the mid-90s, August of 95, at Triple T Transport. Still employed here, but
John,
it wasn't.
John, you must have been in grade school at that point. I mean, as young as you are.
Yes, thank you. Is my hair okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right. So, what I ran into initially in the industry was, calling on shippers, starting from the ground up. I would hear terms like in-house carrier. They're our in-house carrier. They take care of all of our lanes. Doesn't matter where we have a shipment going. This is the person that hauls it for us. Mm-hmm. And it was service-based and relationship-based. So, that in itself was a hurdle to overcome or to combat in our industry as a broker. So in the 80s, we hear stories of guys working as a broker in truck stops on mostly exempted commodities and things of that nature, without, of course, the internet. All they had was a rotary phone or a push-button phone at the best, and they were working out of booths and areas and truck stops to collaborate to find the proper carrier for shipments that were mostly produce and exempted commodities. I think that's how it started. Then if you roll forward into the late 90s and hitting the 2000s, we see a different equation. Along with technology and the internet, we start to see, shippers no longer use the term in-house carrier. They're sending out state matrices previous to that point that were state-to-state matrix. 50 states. This is your rate to all locations in that state. So moving along from that, what I think was the first monumental shift from a business perspective, where previously a lot of carriers just did a really good job and maybe weren't great businessmen, and they were still successful and profitable and could grow, and it was a different dynamic that people were navigating together. As of the internet coming and people actually getting a home computer, I know, Todd, that may not ring any bells for you.
No, it doesn't.
No,
I can't recall that. Sorry.
Wendy, it probably doesn't for you either.
I mean, I had in college, I had AOL.
You had AOL in college.
The chat rooms.
Chat rooms. Well, I wonder if that stuff's still out there.
Yeah.
It is, but I don't think it's quite what it was when I was doing it.
Well, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the honesty. But what we saw then as a company, what we our organization started to recognize and realize was this is a sharper game. This is sharpen your pencil. You started seeing RFPs and RFQs that were taken by a different approach, where it was a more cost-effective approach and competition. With the internet for us as far as transportation, it also enabled a lot of shippers to brand and market throughout the country, where shippers previously sold to people in a region. Can you share anything with that, Wendy? Did you see that? Do you remember those? Did you go through any of that?
So when I started in transportation was actually in August of 2001, and 9/11 happened right after.
Wow.
So my memories of that were more of how the volatility started. So for me, all of this volatility started around that time, and I know, we had the intranet where we had inter-office dealings, and the relationships that we formed with carriers were when they would come in and they had a salesman, and we would talk about the lanes and they would give us prices. We didn't have anything like Lean Logistics to go out and go and auction off a lane or something like that. So we had a relationship. Like you talked earlier, it was very much about relationships, and they had an ability to reach the lanes where we were going, and that's how we met them. It was the quintessential cold call. Now, fast forward, a few years after I left that company and went into another role at another company where I dealt with freight. It was a little bit more towards the internet, but I never, in all of my career, can honestly say I have never searched for a carrier on the internet. Every relationship that I've had with carriers has been either through word of mouth, a recommendation. That's how I met Triple T, was through a recommendation. Because I'm a little wary of the internet. I was in school at a time where when you did research for papers and stuff, you didn't go to the internet because it wasn't trustful. You had to go to a science journal. You had to go to the library, and it's not like that now. So I actually am one of those rare people that do not go looking for that kind of thing on the internet. I'm all about the relationship.
Todd, how about you? From that time period, where were you working then?
Wow. Let's see. 2001.
Were you still in grade school?
Yeah. It's funny. No, I wasn't still in grade school. As much as I would like to think that, I wasn't. So my career roughly started in 94, 95. I was working for FedEx, and I was really in operations, wasn't really in logistics or freight. I was really just working the rank and file in operations. But then roughly around 2001, same time Wendy kind of suggested, I started working a little bit more in transportation. And so more on the distribution side in particular, but I was working for a large national distributor at a regional location. And like Wendy said, I mean, I think much of transportation was sort of word of mouth, and it was relationship, and it was cold calls, and the internet wasn't, as pervasive as it is now. And obviously things have changed dramatically in the last 20, 21 years. Now it's, a much larger sort of visibility to the whole country. And just to be clear, John, so my responsibilities now, like Wendy's, cover more than just transportation. So I've got a team that works in logistics, a team that works in production, and a team that does procurement. And so my perspective specifically around logistics is relegated to my conversations with folks like yourself and with my internal team. And so I'm probably not as privileged in that area now to understand sort of the external environment. So I'd love to kind of get your perspective as well.
I think that we all, it seems like we're talking from that 2000 period to now. Mm-hmm. I think we all agree of what we saw in the 80s, 90s, kind of fizzling out and the industry changing. We didn't have TMS systems relevant everywhere 25, 30 years ago. Now, we see the dynamic change from an equation perspective. In the 80s and 90s, the equation was very simple. It was shippers, then carriers, and there was a smaller percentage of brokers that navigated the network and brought value from a brokerage perspective. You get into the late 90s, 2000s to where we started to see volatility. I think the first point in time where we really felt a crazy amount of volatility that we'd never dealt with before would have been the UPS strike. So I'm thinking going around 2001-ish.
It was
somewhere around there.
I remember it, but I don't remember the year. I just remember the picketing and the I guess all the talking around it, between the carriers and the ABF strike in Dayton. I do remember that significantly.
So I think that for us, that's where, for myself personally and for our company, we started to see that volatility show up there, and we navigated it very well. Mm-hmm. But then, the next impact market-wise that we saw a crazy and great amount of volatility was, the first big Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, in New Orleans. Yeah.
And we had a new dynamic to navigate and to compete with as private shippers and companies and manufacturers and organizations that were moving product throughout the country was FEMA. Mm-hmm. In a market where a high-paying load from the Midwest to the East Coast was $2 and change a mile, the FEMA came to rescue and changed our dynamic from a volatility point and cost point to be at that $4 a mile point. So they impacted the private shippers market immensely from our perspective. So we had to compete with that for capacity, and that carried on. Then we saw $5 a gallon diesel fuel, and then pushing forward into the 2010 period of time, the discussion was geared towards sustainability. Mm-hmm. And that was the buzzword, where, are you building sustainability within your network? And it became a math equation for shippers where the shippers and manufacturers were doing an RFP now and inviting multiple people that they didn't have relationships with and trying to award and drive out costs to be more competitive and more profitable and to grow their brand or their organization. All of this, I think, has kind of culminated. The 2017, I would say, was the next major impact. We had some CSA 2010 discussions that, kind of trickled on through the 2010 to 2017 era. Implementation of drivers' health and fitness and logs and hours of service. When that was finalized and we felt the impact of the hours of service mandate changing in 2017, that took for the average carrier that we've spoken with approximately 24% of their capacity out of the market.
Mm-hmm.
So to talk about volatility, you're gonna make every truck 24% less efficient immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
With that, and then follow up with 4 major hurricanes through the second half of 2017, created a much more volatile market than just the impact of, time on a truck, impact from an ELD perspective. So for us, we've seen a lot of things change, and to your point, Wendy, this is not a surprise that we're here. And I think what the listeners and the people that are going to tune into the podcast here and understand, push has come to shove is what we're seeing. And for good, bad, or indifferent, this is the question is, how long is it going to be this way? Most shippers are dealing with exponential increases of double digits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you guys see as an impact from a percentage impact on your businesses?
I don't have the percentages in front of me. I can tell you that it's almost doubled some of the lane rates
Yeah.
in the last, I'd say probably 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 months. And I expected, whenever you introduce something new like ELDs or mandates, there's always a dust storm that comes up, and it takes a little while for the dust to settle. But what I don't think that companies understand is that what that's going to look like once the dust settles. And I think as a company, you need to take a really good hard look at how your practices and your policies are affecting a much bigger picture. One of my favorite ones that I use are late fees. I think it's the dumbest thing in the world to charge a driver for being late for something he had no control over. He got held up at another stop. There was an accident on the interstate, but you're going to charge him $150 because he was late. That to me is demeaning, and it's frustrating, and it's, I know it affects the shipper as well as it does everybody else, but you're creating a work environment that's borderline hostile. And even though they're not my employee, when I hire a carrier to go deliver something or pick something up on my behalf, they are a reflection of me. And if something happens, I'm the one that gets the call. You don't. You get the call from me, but I get the call from the customer. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that, I want to be mindful of my actions and how I coach my team and my departments, so that when shippers or when carriers come into my facility, I'm not creating extra costs by just being difficult, because you do.
You do.
You do. And I don't know that the industry, when I say industry, meaning people who ship and receive, I don't know that they're thoughtful of that or mindful of that just because you're being difficult, you're getting charged more.
I would marry and agree with some of those comments as well, John. I mean, to Wendy's point, in the last few months, most notably, the rates have gone up extraordinarily. And I think part of the challenge is, as an industry, how do we mitigate those costs in the short term? And, to her point, and I agree with this largely, some of the challenges that exist are also self-inflicted, because people don't realize it's those extraordinary additional expenses or impacted drivers. Those all will have an effect on the current situation. And so I think largely my observation is that shippers, brokers, and carriers don't understand the full environment and don't collaborate on how they can mitigate some of those things, some of the costs. And so that sort of, really getting everybody to the table to talk, to share kind of the challenges, is something I think that's very difficult, but much needed.
I think that's a key word, is collaboration.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing an example right now where I am picking up an item out of another shipper that is a part of my division. And there are cost savings to be had. There's collaboration that could improve service for myself and for them. But he's just territorial about it. And they don't want to collaborate. They don't want to work together. And at the end of the day, it's going to cost us both more, because we can't get on the same page. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I can tell you that from an industry standpoint, particularly in Central Ohio, where there are so many warehouses, there is so much freight coming in and out of Central Ohio, we've got to do a better job at collaboration. We have to do a better job at making a work environment for these drivers that they want to stay in this field just to keep our own costs low. We're doing things against our own self-interests by our behaviors. And I don't know what that solution is, and I can only control what I can control, but there's got to be some acknowledgement there where we have to understand that how some of our policies and processes are executed is making the industry harder for people like Triple T or people, that have carriers and assets to keep employees. Nobody wants to get screamed at because they were 25 minutes late for their appointment.
Well,
You scream at your doctor when he's 25 minutes late?
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
Well, the doctor talk is always a different one. It's obvious to me that the doctor's time is more valuable than ours. And that is the first statement. But I think both of you are all over it. I think and I know that we as an industry leader at Triple T, we still do business relationship based with our carriers. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you have respect for what that job is, and I think that's where it starts. We know there's a driver shortage. We can look on other industry periodicals and see that there's a driver shortage. Okay, so the driver pool last year went down approximately 1%. Mm-hmm. But that's not indicative of really understanding where did the capacity go. Well,
what's caused that?
Drivers that previously were running over the road had better options, a lot of them to take regional and local runs. Mm-hmm. Pay increases offered, five-digit signing bonuses. This is a market we've never seen before from a driver perspective.
Right.
So the lack of acknowledgement that shippers, manufacturers, brokers that don't do relationship business have really driven and created this. So if we look back in the 80s and 90s, it was shippers, carriers, and some brokers. We're going to have a trivia question here that I'd like to put out there for everybody. And I think this is a valid time to bring this one up. Okay? Approximately how many broker authorities are currently active in the USDOT database? 3 to 6,000, 17 to 20,000, 13 to 14,000, or 25,000 to 30,000.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with the old college try and go pick C. Because I have no idea.
How about you, Todd?
I'm going to go with D. I think whatever it is, it's much larger than what I expect. So,
Well, you're on the right track, but it's actually B, 17 to 20,000.
wow.
So the biggest impact, I would say, previous to 2015, we saw numbers in the 13, 14,000 range. And after I think the last volatile push from 2017 that finalized there in 2019, after that, we saw a huge influx of added. So we're looking at probably 25% of the total broker capacity has shown up in our market in the past 5 to 7 years.
Wow.
So when we talk about collaboration, we talk about what we as an industry and what we can do as a contributor to our own success or demise in the industry. We've all had to change the way we do business in the past 20 years. It has changed at times and gone back somewhat but moved forward, and it has changed and never gone back. So we as a company are seeing that the biggest change for our clients and for our shippers and our partners, we don't subscribe to the lowest cost business model being the successful business model.
And I think that's a fundamental key word, is successful, because I think there are a lot of retailers or businesses that focus on that lower cost model, but there are intangible costs that they don't consider, right? So many of us are in a just-in-time model or lower safety stock to, reduce how much assets we have in our possession. If I pay a lower rate and I get a less reliable carrier, let's give me an example. He's picking up something that I need for production. He dropped the load, so I had to retender it out to somebody else because he found a higher rate. Now my load's late. Now I've got 50 people standing around. I'm not getting my production out. I'm not getting the contribution margin for that production being made. I'm paying labor for people being unproductive. And now I've made my customer mad because the delivery's late. So
what'd you save?
Absolutely nothing. So I think that's where I think what I call them the bullies of the market. They can manipulate the market to have that model and be successful because they have that weight behind them. But for myself, who is a middle of the road, from a spend type of ordeal, I'm not looking for the lowest cost model, because lowest cost model is lowest cost right there, but it's high cost over here. So I'm looking at a much larger picture, and as long as if I pay another $400 and everything's on time, everybody else is working, I'm getting my contribution margin, and I'm delivering to my customer. So
Yeah.
when I'm talking to people and I'm using different platforms to talk about, manufacturing, freight is a big part of that discussion because it's ancillary, right? It's something that's people don't think about until they need it, right?
Right.
And it can be a really good strategic partner. It can be a strategic move if you have a good relationship with a broker or a carrier, that you have that relationship that they're going to deliver when they say they're going to deliver, and you can plan around that. And there's a value there that is intangible. How do you put a dollar on that?
Right.
I don't know that I can, but I know what it costs me when you don't show up. So I really wish that from an industry standpoint that we were better at talking about that, better at realizing that. And, if we weren't so focused on driving costs out of the system, we would realize that by doing that, we've driven service out of the system. And that service is now costing us on the other side of the value stream. And, the only way that I know how to fix it is through relationships. Again, I can only control what I can control, but I wish that the industry recognized it more and took care of it more.
That's a great point, Wendy. And I'll just add to that, John, briefly, but I do have a couple questions for you, John. So just be prepared. Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that I talk about with my logistics team is there's two elements to really running good logistics. One is the cost component, right? So cost is important, but it's not exclusive. The other element is continuity of service, right, or supply. And that's really the service element. So you have to have a balancing act for both of those so that you're getting best in service at the lowest cost. But the lowest cost isn't ultimately the only thing you're looking at. And, Wendy, to your point, I think what we're talking about is the net cost of doing business. Which means there's all these other ancillary things that can happen as a result of just getting the lowest cost or lowest bid, if you will, for lack of a better term. And those ancillary costs could end up costing you business. It could end up costing you fees. It could end up costing you a number of other things. So, John, to that extent, in your view, what are the best ways from a broker's perspective to manage those two elements, in your opinion?
Well, I think it starts with the relationship, and it starts with respect. We understand and have a healthy amount of respect for what the driver or the carriers that are actually out making the delivery are running into. When you drive a shipment and we push somebody to be on time and check calls, and they communicate with us twice a day, and we race across the country to get to a location at a certain point in time, to be rejected from the receiver,
Mm-hmm.
to be told, we'll go out in the lot and we'll come get you when we need you, or I'm sorry, we've had a tow motor down because we run this warehouse at 96% efficiency. We have a tow motor down, you're going to have to come back tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
When the shipper scenario versus the broker versus the carrier. So for us, we're always in the middle. And that value proposition is twofold. We have to bring our shippers that value to not have to live or try and use the business model for low cost. You spoke to what you call the bullies in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there are ginormous brokers that work as bullies also.
Mm.
I think that's where, at any point in time when a shipper or a carrier or a broker is so big that they adopt the bully business model, I think that's where it stopped. So I would say for you, Todd, when you needed a shipment moved, I don't do a lot with you, by the way, and that's okay. We've always had a healthy respect and peer-to-peer relationship. When you presented a situation to me a few months ago, we had the option of trying to do what was the lowest cost option, which we thought would fail, and we went with the most value scenario, and it was smooth and seamless and hassle-free. It wasn't the lowest cost, but it was for sure the most value. That's what we are here to provide. So if you or Wendy or any other client that we have asks for a price for something, we're gonna check with our carrier partners and talk to them about what they're looking for from it, and then we're gonna put a fee on top that's not a gouge, that's a partnership, basically a service fee for us to manage and handle that partnering to get your products taken care of. So in the scenario where I think shippers and carriers are both wanting something and they're not communicating, and the broker in the industry has the ability to bring value or present themselves as low cost. And I think that's the showcase for how we operate, to answer your question. How do we do that? Well, we actually partner with our carriers and we provide them what they can't get at other brokerages. It's not you're not going to call in here 24 hours a day and talk to a recording. You're going to get a body, and we're going to address the situation. There are always things that come up, but we fit that value-added role for so many of our shippers So some of the, what you would call the bigger or the bully shippers and companies in the country, they will want to partner with us to use us in a value-added role with specific customers where they cannot go low cost. It's not even a viable option. So, we work through those scenarios, but we know that the other is out there. So for us, it's even more difficult because we're navigating the value scenario. And for everyone else, it's different. If you show up late at some of the food service locations, it's $400 and $500 fines.
Right.
Saving a couple $100 on the freight to pay a $400 or $500 fine, to your point, Wendy, makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not driving value and you're not pushing your company forward. We are a representation of our clients.
Right.
We are. So
John, is that the most challenging part of what you're dealing with today? I mean, let's take if you peel back the onion for a moment and you just put aside for a second the fact that there's this compression on supply and demand that's driving up cost on, in terms of being able to ship across the country. What's the biggest challenges from a broker's perspective right now? And, to the extent that we can partner better, what are some of those things that we can help to address? Because I think ultimately, to Wendy's point earlier, the best way to improve is collectively sit at the table and talk about those challenges, and then somewhere in the middle be able to find solutions that make sense for all parties.
absolutely. I think for us, we're in a different market. The 2020 and now transition it is a different market. We've made it through the 2000s, the internet, the change. All of these things cannot be changed. That's history. But moving forward, we're in a different market where the trucking equation now is shippers, extremely large number of brokerage options,
Right.
not enough carriers, and guess what we have now that that we are navigating and working through? Consultants.
Oh gosh.
Consultants in our industry. So, unfortunately, that adds, 4 different parts to the equation. It was 2.5 in the 80s and 90s, then 3, and now, there's 4 parts to the equation because someone else has to have some outside perspective.
Right.
And when the accounting department, was looking for cost savings, and because transportation is out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
We don't own the truck. The shipper doesn't own the truck. It's just a service we're paying for. So let's get let's drive out that cost on the service, and to Wendy's point, and to your point, drive the service out too.
You do. You really do. And I really wish that there was more education around it, more discussion, and sometimes I just wish people had basic geography classes. But I think from an industry standpoint, if we don't make some corrections quickly, then the volatility that we are seeing now is not only going to worsen, but it's going to increase. And I'm not sure much more the market can sustain.
I don't think that any of us like where we are.
Right.
I think that if you're not being honest with yourself, you keep pushing as we have in the past. I don't think that. I think that the shippers. Well, let me ask this question, Todd. You were in the food service business and distribution network for years, right?
Yeah.
You do food service business also at times, Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time you saw a 3 years food service contract?
Yeah, those don't exist.
Those do not exist.
Well, they did.
No, they did for a long time. That was the de facto, 3 years or whatever approximately was the de facto term. And now it's obviously much tighter because there are fluidity and variable, not variable, but there's volatility that would suggest that there's large swings in a much shorter period of time. And so most of those are now much, much smaller time frames, John. And that's a good point. I mean, it's obviously a sign of the times. So
So
Yeah, I'd like to go back and just ask a brief question with regards to the consultant topic, if we can step back for just a moment. So you said consultants are now a fourth factor in the sort of, the industry. As it relates to consultants, how do you mitigate that? And what can shippers, in the case of me and companies like us, what can we do to help you impact that? Because clearly what we really want to do is we want to say, where's the best value?
correct.
How can we help brokers be more effective? And largely look at whatever our needs are and reduce the cost so that everybody makes a good profit, but at the same time, we don't sacrifice service. So is there something specifically that shippers can do to help with that particular piece of transportation logistics?
Well, I think the first part is the recognition. And that's what we're seeing be the hard pill to swallow. Because I think inevitably in human nature, the number of people that want to step forward and say, I participated in this and I'm to blame at some level.
Right.
That takes the ability to self-reflect at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So in different of any other relationship, that is the key to change. So we know that what worked in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, 2010, that's not a successful business strategy for any of us. So we have to have a sustainable model that we adopt and that we live by. Us as a broker, as a third party provider, you as a shipper have to have an identity, or manufacturer. You also, Wendy, we all have to understand our identity, what we can do, and where to drive the efficiency. So what I would say we have been directing, and I personally have been trying to direct my shippers to do, is something as simple as putting 4 pallet minimums in place. Makes a big impact for cost. Puts a little more pressure on sales. But trying to put minimums in for a lot of these food service companies or people in our industry, because they'll pick you apart. They will pick you apart with small quantities. And when you're able to commingle 3, 4, 5 stops on a truck that we used to do, we can no longer do that because the time is worth so much. The capacity is worth so much more from a time perspective.
Yeah.
So we do push and drive to understand what's put us here. How do we set up our customers, our clients, our partners to be successful? Minimums are a huge part of that. Lead time is the I would say the single most important benefit from a cost perspective. But I think it even gets deeper than that. I think you used to, as a shipper, be able to be successful not knowing your people in your network at a in-depth level. And unfortunately, I think as a shipper to be successful, you're going to need to peel back that onion and understand that you need to partner with people with the same business model, the same goals, and have the same character and integrity, so that you know and understand what value you're paying for. Sometimes you can't afford to have cheap insurance.
You can't.
You can't afford to have the cheapest insurance available. Insurance is just what the word says.
Yeah.
It's insurance. So if you aren't investing at any level in your network more than a transactional or a cost scenario or a bid scenario, and your vision isn't longer than that, then your longevity is going to be just as short in success. So I think from a shipper perspective and a broker perspective, because it's not all on one side, I don't want to come off as leaning one way or the other. There are plenty of people on my side of the table that have contributed to this at a high level, where we are looking at problem solving long term for our shippers and partners. We are providing them the option. Many shippers now are left and relegated to spot market, which is extremely expensive. Okay, which should be the last ditch effort from a shipper's perspective, that yeah, that may get the load covered, but if you're a big shipper or a large shipper, and you are living, surviving through the spot market, then we need to take a good hard look at what choices that you've made to get there, and what we need to change to get you out of there, and have that partnership, collaborative discussion to protect. Because I think we all can relate. If you're the last one, there may not be a chair.
Yeah. Todd, I'd like to ask you from your perspective what your company is doing. One of the things that, I have self-reflected on and how we contribute to the problem, and I'd say my company is, having the ability to get feedback on how we can be better. What do we need to do to be, a preferred shipper? So that getting carriers, because I talk to carriers too, and they'll flat out tell you they will refuse a lane just because they don't want to go into a shipper. I don't want to be identified in that bucket. So, we're doing surveys. We're looking at how we can make the waiting area better. Mm-hmm. It's almost like how you work to have an employee area, right, where they can play. What do you call it? Ping ball or pinball or whatever.
Yeah.
Having that area for them for it to be a pleasant experience, right?
Yep.
That's something that we're currently working on. We have a long way to go, but it's important from my perspective to because I still see them as an extension of who we are and the service level that we need. And if we don't have a good reputation out in the trade, then I'm not going to get good shippers, good carriers in my building, and that's important. So, are you guys doing anything to figure that part of it out?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that's the exact part of the discussion I was sort of alluding to with John. Is like, I think you start with, who are the trusted partners you have in your network, and really understanding what you need to do, what you can do to assist them such that you're a preferred shipper. And that really is, to John's point, that's developing a relationship and understanding what you can do to ease their pain points. Because at the end of the day, whoever's in your supply chain, whether it be in the freight capacity or whether it be upstream ingredient, raw material provider, you have to be able to collaborate, understand how you can make it easy to do business together such that there are no ancillary costs and you're working as one unit. And I think that's the real challenge for everyone in the supply chain. And, even downstream to our end customers. So we're in a manufacturing industry. So we do basically import from different regions of the world. We bring the goods into the US. We do pick, pack, ship and produce products. We ship them to various co-pack places throughout the U.S., and we do obviously last mile. So we basically see every step of the supply chain, and at every stage, you have to have the ability to say, how can I add value to the end customer and make the flow of goods as easy as possible and be the preferred group to that end user, right? So that's the challenge. And John, that was one of the reasons why I asked you specifically, what are those actions that we can do, that shippers can do to help? Because I think ultimately having that discussion openly is what gives you that preferred status. And honestly, like some of the things that you mentioned, those are very helpful. And I'll provide that feedback to my team as well. So, but it also, looking downstream, Wendy, to your point, is also having a conversation with our end customers, saying what it is, that they're needing, so that we can help, cascade that back through the supply chain and provide value to them. So anyway, I don't know if I've articulated that well, but basically it does require developing a relationship and really understanding where the friction points are.
Well, and I think the key for all parties is to understand how to collaborate and partner and bring each other value. It's not a mediation where where no one is going to leave happy is a success. It's not. It's an approach where you actually get to know your shippers to the point that you understand their business, you understand their customers, and then you can go back and you can reach to them and say, hey, if we can do this and this and this will keep us in a much better position. For us, it could be as simple as shifting from shipping to a receiver 5 days a week to shipping to them 4. Because Monday through Thursday is a different rate in a different scenario than a Friday.
Yeah.
So, we collaborate and we bring that value and drive that value, but I don't think that's the industry. Unfortunately, I think from our side, so many people are looking at looking at it through their own glasses that they miss the value proposition from a shipper and vice versa. If we're not able to bring you a value, that's okay. If we're able to bring you a value and you recognize the value, then you're going to be a partner and a client for us.
Yeah.
But we have shippers and clients that are partners that are not feeling the impact of today's market at the gravity that a lot of the others are. And it's because they collaborate, they communicate, they're loyal, so their impact is, from a cost perspective, is much less. But I think they bought in and understood that in the beginning. So they're not seeing the scenarios where freight, to your point, Wendy, freight's doubled in some lanes. I hear numbers from different shippers and different clients. I think the average that we're hearing is about 25% across the board, inbound and outbound and freight. Now, we all know that some of the lanes are more volatile. Some of the situations do get to that double point because of either short lead time or not planning or...
Because they can.
Because they can. So a lot of this scenario that we're dealing with in the industry is not going to fix itself by adding people, which, I think it's a good time for us to have a break here. And I'm going to ask another trivia question.
Okay.
Are you ready for this one?
Yeah, bring it. I'm prepared. I wrote down all my
ready?
trivia answers in advance.
Oh, well, how about that? That is a different approach.
Hey, I'm prepared, John.
What percentage of drivers are female in the industry today?
I'm going to say, is this a multiple choice?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm going to give you some choices.
Okay.
3.9% would be A. B, 10.1%. C, 6%. Or D, 13.2% nowadays.
I'm going to go with A.
You're going with A, you think it's 3.9.
Yeah.
How about you, Todd?
Well, like I said, I wrote my answers down in advance, so I knew you were going to ask this one, John. I believe
Googled
confident. I believe confident. I believe confidently it's probably closer to 6%. I'm going to go with C.
You are correct.
Yeah. All right. See, it pays to do preparation.
Or sit there Googling on your
Google
computer.
it while I'm answering.
We're giving you
Okay, fine. Fine, you busted me. Well done. Well done.
So I'm gonna say that at this point in time, are we in a position where we feel like, as an industry, we recognize the intangible qualities of our partners? Or is it transactional?
Are we in a position? Yes. Will we do it? I am not confident that as an industry that we'll do it very well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just such a large question, right? I mean, it really, I think.
Google it, Todd.
Google it. Let us know what Wikipedia says.
Let us know what they say.
Well, you know what? I actually did that, and I have four answers for you, and they're all multiple choice. No, I think it really depends, John, and I don't think there is one answer. I think there's multiple answers. I think it depends on what your supply chain looks like I think it depends on how large of a player you are within that supply chain. And obviously, whether or not you're, strategically, you decided that you want multiple partners or you want a single partner. And those are all strategic level decisions. And it's going to vary on industry and it's going to vary on the complexity of the supply chain. So there isn't an easy answer. I think every leader within the industry that's not looking very closely at all their cost inputs, whether it be freight, whether it's raw materials, whether it's labor, if they're not looking closely at it and thinking the long game and developing long-term relationships, then they're probably not playing to win. And so, in a case like with us, looking at just within, the US alone, not talking about any of our supply chain challenges outside of the US, we've got to be thoughtful about who we partner with and how we go to market to get the services that we need. And part of that starts with, who are the best providers, who can provide the best service at the lowest cost, but not the lowest cost in and of itself. So again, I don't think there is an easy answer, but I think having a dialogue is the starting place and understanding what your strategy is.
I would agree with that. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's always good to have, a plan before you need a plan. I believe I've heard that said a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And while I agree, that you need a strategic partner, and I'm a firm believer it's good not to have all your eggs in one basket, right? You need to have multiple sources. That's something that my industry in food has to deal with a lot, or multiple vendors and multiple sources. Mm-hmm. But I do think your comment earlier about having the same values and the same integrity are really important for the relationship. Every company has a vision and a mission statement and a value statement. And it's looking for people that live that and believe in that, and then partners that believe in that. I don't want to think of my freight vendors as vendors. I like to think of them as strategic partners, because I'm so reliant on their success, because I'm only successful if they're successful. So it behooves me to do what I can to help them be successful. And me personally, that's tough to get that information in a way, in a platform that I can do something about it, right? I mean, and when I say that, just let's take the survey, for instance. We're constantly give us feedback. And it's tough to get them to give us feedback. It's all anonymous. We don't know who's sending us this information, but it's important to get that feedback to see where we can improve so that we can select the right strategic partner, or we can make improvements to do better. And I think that's where I struggle, and I don't know what your experience is, Todd, but It's hard to get that feedback that is valued and good quality feedback. Not somebody who's just mad, but there's feedback there. There's data there that's really hard for us to get our hands on. We have to try to find it ourselves. Yeah. And I don't even know that I'm going about it the right way, to be brutally honest.
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I agree with you. I think being a preferred partner, there's a variety of ways to get there, but surveys are one of them. And, I think if people are reluctant to or too busy to do it, it also, that's a challenge, right? And how do you uncover that? Because at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is saying to yourself, what are the friction points? How can I help ease those for you? And really soliciting that is probably the best thing that you can do. And so, I don't know. I think if you've got specific partners where you don't get that feedback, I think you probably reach out to them maybe personally. I don't know. We haven't done any surveys here. I have done surveys in a previous roles with different companies, and I know that they do work in many cases, but you're right. There are some out there that just, for whatever reason, never seem to be able to respond. And I don't know if it's because they're quote unquote too busy or just concerned or think that somehow that there's going to be a negative connotation with even providing the survey results. But I love the idea of it. I think it's on the surface a really good way to get to that preferred shipper status, for lack of a better term.
Okay. Well, I think we're on the same wavelength, but so we understand the value proposition. We understand that we actually have to align ourselves with shippers. Like, for us, we align with carriers that understand what we're bringing. Okay. So, poor service carriers, poor communication carriers, they're not going to do well here. Okay, carriers that want support, that have highly skilled drivers, that allow us to manage it, and for us, when we tender a shipment to one of our carriers, we take full control. We take control of the driver communication. We take control of the dispatch communication. So if you have 700 or 800 different clients, they'll have special needs. I know that your needs are different, Todd, than Wendy's, and Wendy's are different than yours. But at the end of the day, you both need that value,
Right.
right? So yeah, we have to understand how everybody's different and what
Yeah.
value they're looking for. Then we have to convey that in a positive manner to our partner that we're moving the shipment with, to be an actual reflection of your organization.
Yeah.
That value does not come out in an RFP.
So how do you get that from your carriers? How do you start that dialogue?
Well, you first, it's much easier for us because we are not soliciting the lowest cost. Yes, everybody in the industry, and my side of the industry, has to at times use the load board, but that's the introduction. That's a smaller percentage of, that's the, hey, we don't do this often. We've got a project coming. We got to do a bunch of loads in this lane. And if you don't have anybody, I understand, but we'll get somebody in there to take care of it, and we'll make it work. And then you develop those partnerships, just like we're developing with shippers, to understand it. Now, that value doesn't show up in an RFP. Where it shows up for us is the capacity, the consistency of capacity for us, the way we pay and compensate our carriers, other than the amount we pay them. The rest of the support that we provide to them is not a standardized thing in our industry. So, we make ourselves extremely good and easy to do business with at Triple T, because we want that relationship. Again, if you don't put it in the jar, it's not coming out of the jar. It's like putting money in the bank. You build your foundation, and for me, I want to teach and help shippers understand how to build a solid network of valued providers. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, the numbers drive the bus too far one way or the other. So then it's, well, can I do without this service with this customer? I don't need Triple T service with this person, but I really need it with this customer because they're going to charge me $500 if I'm late.
Right.
Right? So then we're cutting this pie, and at the end of the day, everybody's, if you cut a pie 6 or 7 times, everybody gets a slice. If you cut it 22 times, nobody has anything to eat. And I think that is a good depiction of where we are from an industry perspective, because as we said in the 80s and 90s, you maybe didn't have to be an intelligent business person to be a successful carrier or be profitable. Moving forward now, the cost to operate have grown exponentially, just like your inbound raw goods materials. We have shippers that are manufacturing based on what raw materials are available at times,
Right.
not based on orders, not based on what their customers are asking for. They're running production based off of what products they can actually get and make to keep the wheels moving.
Yeah.
So that's if I'm on a shipper side, or if I'm anywhere in this industry, I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, this is very bad. This is alarming.
Yeah.
There's 2 ways to handle it. We can hope, and we know hope is not for us. What's the saying? Do you know that one? Who's hope
Yeah.
for? So hope and weather the storm is not a leadership quality or model.
Right.
It's drive, drive the solution for the industry in a positive way, so that you're not in this scenario again, right?
Yeah.
First time, shame on me, or shame on you. Next time, shame on me. That thought process is what I think that the shippers and the people on my side of the fence need to really recognize. What do we do not to get here again?
Right.
Where did we go wrong to drive the capacity to where, the number of people that want to drive a truck is such a small number? So
Yeah.
we have done many things as a whole industry, and we're not grabbing the moral high ground on this discussion, because I think that if you don't have respect for what that job is, then I think at that point in time we can't help. You've missed it. The opportunity is gone. So I think the way we treat our carriers and our partners, the way they're looked at, the way that we work with our customers and shippers, and we try and bring them the value of understanding what they're getting. But that's always a difficult sell when it's an RFP and everybody's getting compared on a spreadsheet. All people aren't equal, all companies aren't equal. So the value you get from one company to another is also going to change, what you receive. The shipper of choice discussion of being someplace that they want to go is, I think, a fundamental step in recognizing that's something that every shipper can control in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't always work from a warehouse management system.
Right.
And so now transportation has to go to the warehouse and say, look, we can't run at 96% efficiency. If anybody gets held up, they have to wait for 10 trucks to get loaded to get their truck in the door and to get loaded because they're 25 minutes late, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody wants and looks at their own network and department, but you've said it, Wendy, on the call, getting even the partners to partner is difficult.
It is.
Because they're territorial.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same. I think at this point in time, to grow, we have to be in a position to present how we got here and how we don't want to be here as a solution moving forward.
One of the things we talked about early on in the podcast today is the fact that costs on freight have gone up extraordinarily, particularly in the last 3 months. I think looking at it from a macro level, in your view, what's the one thing that shippers can do to help get that pricing back in line with what are more historic rates? And I realize that's a large question, but I think it's a valid question, right? If you really want to work back towards solutions where the entire network is more right-sized, and we know that many of our end customers are bearing that expense, how do we make sure we get it more in line with what it has been historically?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's a big answer, and it's a broad answer.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether the recognition or the self-reflection is there, but I think the business model where we're going to drive out cost has met its match. I think at some point in time, attrition takes a toll, and I think that's where we are. So one trivia question here I'd like to throw in at this moment, because I think that this speaks to what you're talking about. What percentage of refrigerated tenders are being declined in the past month?
Is this multiple choice?
Yes, it is.
Todd gets to answer first, so he's Googling it right now.
No, you better not.
All right. Give me
Hands up. Put your hands
my
up.
You
options.
need to
All
be able
right.
to see your hands.
They are. All right.
All right. A, 39%. B, 17%. C, 29%. Or D, 22%.
Okay, I'll go with D, 22%.
I'm going to go A.
You're going A.
I'm going to go A.
Todd, you lost that one.
Wow.
She is correct at 39%. So what does that say when 2 out of 5 across the board shipments are not accepted and declined by the carriers?
Yeah.
What does that say from a stability perspective that we have driven the industry to? If we look and treat transportation as a commodity, which I think is what's happened, I think it's been driven to a commodity level. You're going to have huge, overwhelming spikes and swings. And to your point earlier, Todd, the volatility is the market swings coming faster and more aggressive and closer together.
Right.
So for us as an industry, we have to step outside and say, you know what? We're going to really work on partnering with our shippers and push them to improve their networks by driving out non-valued partners and bringing in the valued partners closer, and not looking at transportation annually as where we're going to continually be able to drive out a large amount of excess cost. I think when you do that, I think we saw from the midpoint of 17 through 19, coming into 2019, we saw the market turn and nosedive back to, rates that we hadn't seen since 15, 16. Mm-hmm. And, that was pretty brutal, I think, from a shipper driving that and broker driving that down to that extreme, that set the stage for where we are now. I think the most impactful part of what we're seeing today is the fact that there was no ELD mandate. There were no major changes from a governing perspective in our industry. There were no major hurricanes that brought this on. This was like to your point, Wendy, this was a slow-moving undercurrent for about 3 years that we felt.
We knew it was coming.
You knew
it was just
coming.
a matter of time.
and unfortunately, can the industry and can people in leadership at all levels, can they listen to what we're talking about today, and it bring them a value for how they manage and run their businesses and their networks moving forward?
So for me, where the gap is, particularly in this area, there's not a good place to collaborate with other shippers that are in my area. I'm looking for partners in the lanes that I'm going to create consistent round trips. But if they're not in my division, as in my company, it's tough to find them. And again, fight that territorialness that happens, right? But if that existed, I think that I can provide data. I can provide an argument to go with that model rather than, what some of the big retailers do where they, there's all these fines and, threats, and it's just very hostile to me, where if there's a smaller group of us that work together, we can drive out a lot of our own costs by working together and lining up lanes and collaborating. For me, there is just not a methodology to do that easily. That's where I need value. That's where I need help or guidance, whatever term you want to use, to set me up with those partners. That's a value that I think Triple T can help with is, hey, I know the shipper out here that's frozen. They're looking to come east. I'm going out west. How can we partner up? That's what I'm looking for.
Well, I think we do that. What it takes, though, is consistency.
Yeah. So
if your freight is seasonal,
which mine isn't anymore,
right? Or if it's inconsistent from a volume perspective, you're putting yourself out there.
You are.
When it's 5 shipments a week, for example, going from here to the West Coast somewhere, depending on where it is in the West Coast, there maybe is a value proposition or there isn't. And
right.
and that is the most difficult. with the produce interaction that comes through California in the summer versus the winter, north versus the south. Building consistency is going to mean that you're going to be paying more than what the market is at times of the year. And then when it's not that time of the year, you're going to be paying less than what the market is at times in the year. So inevitably, it's a long-term committed approach
It
to
is.
be successful there. At any point in time, an analytical approach comes in that doesn't understand that, to do an RFP, that goes out the window because they're looking. The goal of a bid or an RFP is to drive out excess cost. At what cost is what we're talking about.
Right.
Do you save 10 cents, which you know is going to cost you in this market 50%? To save 10%? Or do you say, you know what, we're going to roll with the 20% and be thankful that we're not out in that 50% scenario ever? Because we've insulated ourselves. It's like insurance.
Yeah. But again, I think if there's a network that's there, give you an example. I run up to Canada and back quite a bit. And when one of those lanes isn't as active as what I need coming back, I have to have a plan B, right? So I've spent a lot of time building that plan B. But as long as I'm keeping that truck on that continuous loop, guess whose trucks aren't late? Guess whose customer deliveries are on time? Guess who doesn't get phone calls at 2 a.m. because they're out of something, There's value there for me.
Sure.
So I would just like to be able to do that on a broader scale as I bring on more of my own managed freight. I don't have a lot right now in the role that I'm in now, but we're growing, and who knows what the landscape's going to look like next year.
Correct.
The landscape is constantly changing right now, and I had a discussion with the controller this week that I just don't even know what it's going to look like next week. How can I project what it is next week right now? Because I can't. It's so volatile.
How do you set yourself up for success?
And the only way I can set myself up for success in this particular market are the loops. Keeping that driver happy, him showing up every time, delivering every time, and then I can move on to the next problem. I am in firefighting mode every day. And I don't know what it's like for you, Todd, but that's where I'm at. And that accountability falls on people like me. We've created some of this, and the companies that we work with have created some of this. And I think my company is recognizing it, dealing with it, but how do we solve it?
Right.
I think that's the partnership and open communication and collaboration is where the solution comes from. If we fail to do this with our shippers and our carriers from a collaboration perspective, then this market that we're dealing with and this volatility lasts longer, costs more, and continues. Believe me, I can honestly tell you, good people are all over the industry. Okay? Unfortunately, there's not a trust level in our industry that we need.
I think that is a big statement right there.
I think that's where it starts.
There's a connotation there that we need to deal with.
How do we do that?
How do we do that? Yeah. That's a good question.
That is a good question.
The perception that the broker's making all the money or the carrier's making all the money. Well, I can tell you, there's some clients I move, 500 loads a week for, and we lose on 100 of them in today's market because they're volatile lanes, they're fluctuating volumes, they're not consistent days of the week, or they're short lead time. And I think that is the fireman routine that you're speaking of. You're putting out fires all day.
That's all I'm doing.
We are solving those problems all day to mitigate, but it's even more difficult when your partners and your shippers don't recognize that they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they've hamstringed us and tied our hands behind our back to bring the value because the approach is to try and drive more value. And, you know, that is inevitably going to backfire, as we know that this market is definitely stronger, and, you know, it's not showing us any signs that we have relief on the horizon.
Yeah.
So I read a statistic somewhere that there are plenty of people that hold a CDL, but people don't stay in this industry. So how do you work with the carriers that you work with to attract and retain and to keep them in this industry? I don't think it's a shortage of CDLs. It's just a shortage of people that want to keep doing it.
Well, I think that that's a great question, but I think we don't treat them transactionally. We treat them as a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mean a partner, I mean, you know, they're in a position when they do business with us that they don't need to invoice us. They don't need to invoice us.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to bill us in any way. They can scan their information from their bills to us, in the you know, if they're a regular for us, and we load them routinely and we partner with them. Their money is automatically deposited into their bank account every Friday, and they get an email with a breakout. And for us, I think that is, you know, a crucial part of the equation. Now, how do you flex when networks are stressed? When, let's say, you come to me for 10 or 20 or 30% more one week than any other week.
And I've done that to you before.
Sure you have. You have to have the ability to flex.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also a partner and understand what you've done to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you're not going to, you know, normally you're not going to get, if you go from 5 a week to 15 for 1 week, you know there's going to be some additional cost
Yep.
here or there. What we try to do is, you know, maybe make 5 10. And, you know, if we get hurt and have to charge additional for the 5, you're still better than
Mm-hmm.
10 out of it at network pricing or at market pricing, and you've gotten your value, but you also don't have anything late. You have no chargebacks. You have no, you know, you're not getting
Invoice
a call.
deductions.
You're not getting the call at 2 in the morning with the truck that's not coming, or you're not retendering.
Yeah.
You know, all of those scenarios. That is the hidden value that we provide. But that starts with the commitment, and it starts with our business model as a company. And I think, you know, we're all wanting to improve our business model and to understand where to bring value to our industry and where we need value in our industry. So I think for everyone, it's that it goes back to self-reflecting. Reflecting and say, how did we get here? Why are we here? What's it going to take to bring about change?
Yeah.
So is a quarter better than me paying 50 cents? Yes. Well, why don't I, you know, work with my partners to try and make a quarter an increase before the 50 cents becomes forced, or, you know, a complete 100% increase in a lane. So
John, like when you kind of distill all the stuff that we've kind of talked about today, right? To jump in here for a second. So freight costs are up considerably. Collaboration is vital to optimizing cost and service from a shipper's perspective, and becoming a preferred shipper are really actionable, tangible things that we can wrap or distill some of the discussion around. Right?
Absolutely. But I think it has to come from a deeper level, Todd. I think that you're all over it from quantifying and where we're headed. But I think, you know, it's going to come from a deeper level for all of us. And unfortunately, I don't think that the industry is in a position. I think, you know, to be quite frank, I think the tender rejection rate going up in January in a historically low or slower period of time that we would all expect that if there's a reprieve, it would be in January, sends a loud and clear message.
Yeah.
You
Agreed.
know, So if it's not acknowledged, or do you take the it'll change tomorrow and turn a blind eye to it? No, I think we have to lead at this stage of the game. I think we have to go out on the limb and say we want to change this, which is difficult for a lot of people to accept, and it may cause them to change the way they're operating and the way they've done things. Doing business the way that they did it 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or running RFPs the way that were done 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, I think is going to be a recipe for more fallout and more angst and more of the industry being volatile and not becoming stable.
Right.
So
Cool.
I think that's where we're headed, and I want to thank everybody for your participation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on, and this has been really rewarding for me to hear from peers in the industry, as well as from brokers. And John, I look forward to talking with you in the future, and you as well. Wendy, I appreciate having you guys an open forum like this.
Well, we appreciate it. Wendy, same to you. I think the value you bring is definitely recognized and appreciated by myself. Your ability to convey and communicate at a level that everyone can understand is definitely appreciated from us. But I want to say thank you to you. Thank you to everyone that listens. Please share feedback with us. It's important for us to hear what everyone's thoughts are, to continue bringing value to shippers and people in our industry and ourselves. Just want to say thank you.
All right.
You as well.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, John.
Have a great rest of your day. Great to meet you.
You as well.